Okay, I think we are live. So hi, everybody. Welcome to another FYI webinar, part of our series with PALCUS. My name is Angela Samos, and we are going to be talking about how to become a Portuguese citizen today, which has been quite the popular topic, and we get a lot of inquiries about that. So we decided to do a webinar. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. If you have questions, and I'm sure we're going to get a ton of questions today, you'll want to either put the questions in the Zoom. If you're joining us on Zoom, there's a chat box or a Q&A box. You want to do it there. If you're following us on Facebook, put them in the live feed, and we will be following questions there, and we will answer as many as we can live. And then if you have additional questions after the live feed, or if you're watching this later on as a recording and you have questions, you can send us questions to palcus@palcus.org. Today's presenters are Marcia Souza de Pont and Sabrina Broom from Portugal Solutions, based in Rhode Island, correct? Rhode Island. I'm super excited to have them because their focus is to help people go through this process. So this is their website, but I also wanted to point out that we have them listed on our website. If you go to the palcus.org website, go up to resources, and there's a drop-down menu, click on consular. There's a bunch of resources there, but here you will see a few organizations that help with going through the citizenship process and other things like renewing your cartão cidadão and procurações and things like that. So there's a few here in California, but Portugal Solutions is based in Rhode Island, and these are all links. So you go to our website, you click on those boxes, and they'll take you right there. And I also just wanted to point out that on this page, you can become a PALCUS member. If you find this webinar helpful or any of the services that we provide helpful, we really encourage you to become a PALCUS member. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sabrina and Marcia. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's just jump right in. I know you have some slides to share, and for those of you watching us live, we're going to have them run through a few slides first, and then we will take questions. So they don't have many slides, so we'll have them do that first, and then we will take questions. So thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Angela. First and foremost, just want to say thank you to you. Thank you to everyone at PALCUS for getting this webinar organized. On behalf of Marcia and myself, we just started Portugal Solutions a year ago, and this is by far one of the most popular services that we provide people. So this webinar is just going to be a brief, informational, very general overview of what the process looks like, the different ways that you can apply for citizenship, the necessary documents you need. We always say the first thing when we talk to people, every case is a specific case. So the way we go about it is we usually first set up a consultation with people, and then we can get to know your case a little bit better and get into the details of it. Marcia, you want to say anything before we begin?
I just want to say thank you to everyone, special to PALCUS to organize this webinar. And as you said, Sabrina, this is the information that we're going to give. It's a little bit of the reality in the United States. When we know the rules, we will be able to help people out of the United States too. But the legislations or the law keeps changing, and we need to do updates at some point. When we decided to start a process of a citizenship, we need to know at the time, probably the things already change a little bit, but not too much, because to be a Portuguese citizenship, I used to say, just a question of papers and money. That's it. We will be able to get our dual citizenship. And I will start, and since Sabrina already said, the Portugal Solutions, it's here to help the Portuguese community, and work together with the Portuguese consulates and work together with the entities in Portugal just to facilitate all the process. And I will start with the two easiest ones, because for someone who was born out of Portugal, just need to have one parent's Portuguese, and they will be able to apply for a dual citizenship. I will ask Sabrina, since just as I said, just one Portuguese parent needs to be Portuguese, needs to be born in Portugal, I like to say, be careful, because at some point, if you were born in Portugal and went to the United States and did the American citizenship, you never lost your Portuguese one. Give you the right, since you were born in Portugal, you're Portuguese for the rest of your life. And doesn't matter if you never did a Portuguese ID card, you never did anything Portuguese during all your life, but you're still Portuguese. You just need to do a Portuguese ID card. But to do the citizenship or give the Portuguese citizenship to your son or to your daughter, you just need to do a first step, register your marriage, because at some point, if you're married in the United States, you need to do the first step, and your kids will be able to do it for you. Register the marriage. And to get a citizenship, I used to say it's only three documents. Get a birth certificate, original birth certificate, long form, a copy of your driver license and American passport, and information from your parents. The one that is Portuguese, it's easier. We will be able to get the birth certificate in Portugal. The one that is American or another nationality, we just need an original birth certificate for him. And that's it. Start the process. The process, sometimes it's easier to do it at your local Portuguese consulate, because we have two ways to do the Portuguese citizenship. We will be able to send all the documents directly to Portugal or any civil registry in Portugal, or we can work with the consulate on the area that you live, where it's easier sometimes work with the local consulate, because they will be able to do all the paper, all the process here in the United States. If we decided to send all the documents to Lisbon, we have to deal with a long process, because in Portugal, in Lisbon, they will be able to receive all the process around the world, and we have to go and send it in, at least have a long list of citizenship. That's our advice, to work with your local consulate. You will be able to apply by yourself, or you will be able to work with the Portuguese solutions and get your citizenship. Another way to be Portuguese, it's through your grandparents. Doesn't matter if your parents never did the citizenship, you can go straight to one of your grandparents needs to be Portuguese. This process, it's done completely in Lisbon, and any civil registry. We have a specific ones that receive this type of process, but the documents, the list is a little bit longer, but it's only documents that we need to get done. You need to have a birth certificate, copy of your driver license and American passport. We have a specific one on this process. It's an FBI criminal records from the countries that you will live more than a year, and your grandparents' documents. Sometimes it's not an easy process to get an old birth certificate, but especially in Portugal, everything is already organized on the archives, and you will be able to get a certified copy of your grandparents. This is another service that we will be able to provide and get a birth certificate from Portugal. And it's a little tricky. We have to do a test in Portuguese language. Sometimes it's not easy for second and third generation do the test, but we have the Professor João Caixinha here in the United States, and he will be able to provide all the information. And we have another entities that they do specific lessons and at least can prepare the person to do this test. And at some point you need to, another tricky thing, but it's not difficult, it's to prove a connection to the Portuguese community. And sometimes it's very easy because you belong to a Portuguese church, a Portuguese club, your husband or your family at some point is connected, some Portuguese entity, and it's easier to just with a simple letter to prove the connection to the Portuguese community. This is the two first ways to become Portuguese, parents and grandparents. Sabrina, pass the ball to you.
Yeah. So the next way to become a Portuguese citizen, very similar to the first two we mentioned, and it's through a Portuguese spouse. So if you have been married to a Portuguese citizen at least 3 years, previously it was 6, they just changed that rule, you are able to apply for your Portuguese citizenship. So this process is a little bit longer. It looks kind of similar to getting it through a grandparent. Does have to go through the conservatoria as well in Lisbon, handled in Portugal. So we see usually it takes between 2 to 4, sometimes 5 years. Same basic documents as the last time: birth certificate, passport, driver's license. You will also have to do the FBI criminal background check. But the good news with this is you do not need to take the language test. That was also a new rule that they just made recently, which facilitates the process for a lot of people, because I know sometimes we marry someone who is Portuguese and we don't speak the language ourselves. You will also need your spouse's Portuguese identification. So whether that is a birth certificate or cartão de cidadão, bilhete de identidade, of course, we can get that for you if you don't have that readily available. And you will also need to register your marriage in Portugal if that has not been done already. And that is another very simple process. It's just getting the marriage certificate and doing it in Portugal. As Marcia explained, you do have to get the letter of connection to the Portuguese community. It's a little tricky, but typically you just have to prove maybe that you speak the Portuguese language, you've traveled to Portugal with your spouse and their family in the past couple of years, or maybe you live in a diaspora and you're very involved in your local church or some kind of cultural event. So it's just explaining to Portugal why it is that you want to be a citizen. The next topic is one of the newest ways to become a Portuguese citizen. And this is always subject to change. So the next two that I'll be speaking of, they're fairly new, and the rules and regulations are always being altered. So do keep that in mind. And that is getting your citizenship through Jewish heritage, the Sephardic ancestry. In order to do this, you do have to prove direct ancestral link to Sephardic ancestry. And the way they do that is by getting a Jewish community certificate. So the Jewish community in Lisbon and in Porto can go through your last name, they can go through synagogue records, they can go through cemetery records, and they can find a way, if the way exists, to kind of prove that your Jewish heritage can be directly connected to Portugal. I think it's one of the most interesting ones, but because it's one of the newer ways to become a citizen, it can be a little tricky. So again, it's always subject to change. It is a longer process. We see typically it takes between 3 to 5 years generally, but again, that's going to depend on if the requirements are altered or if they require some new things as the years go on. But the basic things that you'll need, again, it's very similar to the last two we mentioned: birth certificate, passport, driver's license, and the FBI criminal background check. And last but not least, one that has been very interesting for people that have no connection to Portugal whatsoever, and they're just, really interested in moving to Portugal or just investing in Portugal and becoming a citizen that way, would be through the Golden Visa program. This is a way to get citizenship that's a little bit different than the last 4 we just talked about. It has nothing to do with your ancestral connection to Portugal. It's more about how much you're willing to invest in Portugal and the different ways that you can go about that. Typically, what we do at Portugal Solutions, we will work with lawyers in Portugal, real estate agents in Portugal, sometimes the Conservatoria in Lisbon, to kind of facilitate the process. So on our end, what we do is collect your basic information. We can help you apply for a Portuguese fiscal number, which we call contribuinte, or a NIF, which will allow you to open up a bank account. But essentially, it's just making a qualifying investment in Portugal through residential real estate, commercial real estate, investing in funds. But buyer beware here. It's not as easy as getting an apartment in Lisbon and making that investment and thinking you're good to go. It does take a period of 5 years at least that you have to have the investment made. And for example, the real estate that you buy has to be in certain regions of Portugal. It can't be in Lisbon, it can't be in Portugal, or certain areas of the Algarve region. So they're looking more for someone that's willing to invest and develop certain areas of Portugal that, you know, tourists may typically not go to. So like we said, this one is definitely subject to change based on the investment you make and how you're looking to go about it, but we can help you collect all the necessary documents and get you in contact with some people over in Portugal on how to keep going with that. So the way we do it at Portugal Solutions, you feel free to reach out to us either via email or via phone. We always like to set up a consultation first, get to know the person, get to know the process, the details of you know, your specific case, and then we can continue from there.
Awesome.
Marcia,
Thank you.
Angela?
Thank you, Sabrina and Marcia. So we already have a ton of questions that have come in, but I just wanted to relay my personal story because I think some will be able to relate to it. And it's been quite a process, I will tell you. So I'm third generation Portuguese American. My great grandparents were born in Portugal and immigrated here. So that means that my grandparents were not Portuguese citizens, nor were my parents. So I initially started down the grandparent route, but that meant that I would have to make my grandmother a citizen first, and then I could become a citizen, right? And the challenge we ran into there is that her birth certificate here in the United States says Alicia, but every other documentation for her throughout her life says Alice. And so Portugal wanted the name change document. When did she go from Alicia to Alice? And it never was. It was just, you know, here in the United States, we just, you know, wrote a different version of the name and it was okay. So I actually spent a good year or so trying to figure that out, and it ended up being wasted time. The other challenge we found was that the service I was using at the time wasn't able to locate my great grandparents' documents in Portugal to even prove that they were related to my grandmother. So we scrapped that, and I am now doing it through marriage. And so I will just say that I mailed my application directly to Lisbon in October of 2020. So great timing, right, with the pandemic. And the status of it right now is that it is about halfway through the process, and we're just waiting, right? So, you know, on time, based on what they estimate is about 2 years. But I will say you have to be diligent and follow up on these things, and don't just say, well, it's been 2 years, I haven't heard anything, right? Because here's what happened. I hadn't heard anything. My husband happened to be going to Portugal, and I said, if you're there, do you mind just passing by the office to check? You know, because I've tried calling, I've tried logging on, I've tried doing all these things, and I couldn't find out if they had even received my application. And no joke, he went there and they said, oh, yes, we have it, but it's about to get sent back to her because she forgot to sign this one document. So unless she can get us a signed document within the next 48 hours, she's going to have to start the process over again. So had my husband not gone there, I would be starting all over again. So thank you, hubby, very, very much for doing that. But it's just a demonstration that you really do have to kind of stay on top of things. And if working with a service helps do that, like Portugal Solutions or one of the services out here in California, I think it's well worth the money, especially because you guys know the ins and outs of everything, right? So I just wanted to relay that. And I'm very excited that, you know, one day I will receive my "You are a citizen" in the mail, and it'll all been worth it. So why don't we get to one of our first questions? Gosh, there's so many here. Okay, just going to go to the top.
I just want to, Angela, if you just let me explain a little bit, because this process had a positive evolution the last years, what the way that they do things in Portugal. And electronically, we will be able to answer questions and provide information that can help with this type of process. But just to give an information, every process that goes to the services in Portugal, they provide a password and a process number.
Mhm.
And with the password, you will be able to check the status of your process. They have all the phases, and we know since all the process enter until it's conclude, we will be able to check what's the status of the process, but we not be able to see if it's missing a document or it's missing a translation, or if they need to send a letter, an official a letter, and ask the formal question, and we need to answer. That's the point that sometimes takes longer and longer just to give an information or just to sign a paper. I think with the new legislation that they did in 2022, just happening in March, they will be able to at least facilitate the process when they are seeing the process when they doing things in Portugal.
Okay.
But it's good to know that you can, through email, apply for your password, and you will be able to check which phase is your process. And that's only just a simple information, but it's good to know it's already there. They starting to analyzing all the documents, and at least, it's concluded what's going on with the process in Lisbon, because you can call or you can send an emails, but it's going to take a couple of days just to have an answer from them.
Right.
And just check the status. Sometimes it's good for us to know what's going on.
Good to know. Okay, so this one is a little lengthy, and chances are, Bobby, you're the gentleman who asked the question. You may just have to reach out to Sabrina and Marcia and ask for their help. So he went to Providence to have applied for citizenship for himself, his wife, and his 2 daughters. I also registered my marriage in Portugal. I received my cartão único. I don't know if that's the same as a cartão cidadão, and have been informed that my wife and my younger daughter are citizens, and we just need to take their photos. My problem is that my older daughter, Ashley, is still not a citizen, and it's been over a year. They were all done at the same time, and when I email them, they just say it's in the process in Lisbon and we have to wait. Did they lose the paperwork and they made him pay cash with no receipt, which made him uneasy? So what would be the suggested course of action there?
Yeah, let me answer that, because going to the Portuguese consulate in Providence is my specialty. Actually, Bobby, to answer your question, they most likely did not lose your process. It can take up to a year or sometimes a little bit longer than a year. It just depends when it goes in, if something had to get sent back. So it may most likely did not lose it. Anyone under the age of 18, usually that process gets done a little bit faster. We can see it take as little as 3 months, 6 months for someone under 18. And for anyone over 18, it is a little bit longer. We do typically see that. But the best way to go about it, and the best way to figure out if your daughter is a citizen, if you did take care of it at the consulate, just reach out to them via email. Email is usually the best way to get in contact with them. There are now 3 people working at the Providence consulate, and they're pretty good at responding to emails on time. So I would reach out to them.
Okay, great. So this
I
person,
might advise to all of you, since you just let me complete, when you do anything that you do at the consulate or at our service, doesn't matter, you need to have an invoice or a receipt for everything that you did. Because at some services, it's free, but they need to give you a receipt that mention what you did at the consulate, how much they charge, or if it's a free services, because we have service too. But you need to have a proof that you went that day to the consulate just to do the specific service, and you need to leave the office with a receipt in your hands, because it's the proof that you were there and what type of service that you request. That's my advice to all the person, because that's what they do, not only at the consulate, but any civil registry, any financial services, everything that when we go in person and do something, we need to leave that place with a proof for everything that we ask.
got it. This person has been in stage 6 dispatch for the last year, and his entire process has taken 5 years. Is that normal, or what should they do at this point?
but the process taking 5 years where? At the consulate or at the civil registry in Lisbon?
They didn't specify, so
Okay.
it's Don George, please
Just
clarify
because
your question.
when
Yeah.
it's in out of the United States, when you go to the services in Lisbon, as I said, you get in a list with all the process that comes from all over the world.
Mhm.
And
Right.
sometimes can take longer, but when it's in a specific consulate, I don't believe that they taking 5 years just to do a process.
Okay. This is a pretty simple one. Kara, her mom has not had her citizenship, but and she's first generation American. If she got her citizenship through the grandmother, could then Kara use her mother's citizenship to get hers, or would she still have to go through the grandmother?
No. Sabrina, I don't know if you want to answer, but this is the best way to go.
Yeah,
If
it's
your
always
parents
easy
are
to
still
go.
alive, yeah, go through your parents first, do step by step, because you're going to avoid the process to do it through a grandparent. You will be able to go directly. You don't have to force your mother or father to be Portuguese just because of your process. But if they don't mind, is going to facilitate your process. Do your parents first, and after you can apply for yourself.
Got it. We're going to move to a couple of Facebook questions from Josephine. Can I register my marriage and submit my kids' birth certificates at the same time? What age is a child considered an adult in Portugal, and does the process change for them at that point?
Yes, you can register the marriage and do the citizenship for your kids at the same time. Anybody under 18 is still considered a child in Portugal, and that means that they don't have to pay for their citizenship. So if you've got little ones out there, under 18, and you're looking to put their citizenship in, do it as soon as possible, because then you don't have to pay the $240, $250 fee.
Okay. And does the birth certificate have to be a recent long form, or can it be the older version with the apostille? She's going to Portugal in 2 weeks and wants to submit the marriage and birth certificates because her local consulate isn't accepting it. My husband is already a citizen, and I want to take and she wants to make her kids a citizen. I guess the question, yeah, can she do an older version of the birth certificate with an apostille?
She should be able to, especially if it has the apostille on it.
Yeah. The important needs to be, and each state has their own format for the certificate. Make sure it's a long form, because needs to have all the information. Needs to be a long form certificate, original. And if the person is going to do the process in Portugal, it's better to take the document already translated and with an apostille on the translation too. Needs to be apostille on the original birth certificate and an apostille on the translation. When you do process in Portugal, everything needs to be certified and translated. It's easier. When you do it at the consulate, they sometimes ask for the apostille on the documents, but doesn't need to be translated.
So we're getting a lot of questions about whether or not documents have to be translated. Can you clarify, because there's the application that you have to fill out. So do your answers have to be in Portuguese? Do your letters of recommendation have to be in Portuguese? Does what do all the documents have to be translated or not? Can you go over that?
It'll depend on where you're doing the citizenship, like Marcy was just explaining. So if you're going through your parents and it's getting done at the consulate, American documents do not have to be translated. But if you're going through a grandparent, a spouse, or however, and it's being sent directly to Lisbon, birth certificate must be translated. Application responses must be in Portuguese. The letter must be translated to Portuguese. The FBI criminal record must also be translated to Portuguese. So anything you're sending over in English must have a translation with an apostille as well.
You just made me scared, Sabrina, because I submitted through spouse and I don't think I translated anything.
That's why it's taking longer and longer.
And that's a lot. We see that with a lot of people that reach out to us and say their process has been there for 2 years. So a lot of times what we do is we go through and we say, okay, did you do this? Did you do this? And they're like, oh, it's not translated. It doesn't necessarily mean it will get rejected in Portugal. That's not what we're saying. It just could make the process slightly
Easier.
longer.
Okay.
If it's not.
Fingers are crossed because my God. All right. So at that point, is it possible to submit documents like, oh, I forgot to submit the Portuguese translated versions. Here they are. Will they take supplemental documents like halfway through the process?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
The most part
that's
of
good
the
to know.
time, it's they request the documents or additional information. But if you want to anticipate it submitted, you will be able to add documents to your process.
Got it. Okay. What documentation do I need? Oh, we kind of covered that. You need birth certificates and everything. Basically, someone saying where they live, do they have to go through their local consulate, or can, like, if somebody lives in Florida, can they reach out to the New York consulate, or, you know, another consulate maybe that is being more responsive?
Yeah, you can reach out to any consulate in the US. They are supposed to take anyone regardless of where they're living. The only thing that the consulate most likely will require, and we always suggest for our clients, is an apostille if it's coming from outside of the state that they're working in. So if you're
Okay.
living in Florida and you're going to send it over to the New Bedford consulate, for example, you're going to want to get an apostille on all of your documents from outside of that state.
Got it. Okay. There's a question here about whether or not someone can be made a citizen posthumously. And I think the answer to that is no, correct?
No.
Yeah. Okay. My father is long since deceased and was born in Portugal. All the necessary documents were sent to Portugal. Okay, there wasn't a question. Sorry about that. I need to vet these a little better. If my paternal grandparents were born in Portugal and my father was born in the US, is now a dual citizen, do my sister and I, US born, need to go through, says the more tricky process, but to your point earlier, he should go through their father who has dual citizenship. That's the easiest way. Always try to go through your parents where possible, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, right? There are certain times, at one point, if you got it through a grandparent, you were not able to then pass that on to your children, correct? So we always want to look at when a person got their citizenship.
Got it.
Right?
Now,
yeah, it's correct. But according to the new rule, because before, when you got your citizenship through your grandparents, just only your kids after that point will be able to get the citizenship through you. But they changed the law and you can go back now. It's okay if you get a citizenship through your grandparents and at the age of 60 years old, sometimes it's easier than, do you have a daughter with 40 already and she wants to apply through you, you will be able to do it now.
so we have someone here whose parents were married in the US, but no marriage certificate exists. So they've tried the local government, the Catholic Church, but their naturalization papers state when and where they were married. Can they use that?
No.
At some point, they need to have an official marriage certificate from the state. They can collect all the documents and go to the vital services of the state and try to get an official American marriage, because it's easier for Portugal to work when an official marriage. It's not us that we're going to do or work with the church or the American citizenship. No, it needs to be America to work the process and see what type of document they will be able to provide as an official marriage certificate.
Got it. So Cindy, if you're listening still, you'll want to take that naturalization record and go to where you think your parents were married and see if that local government, county, city, whatever, will give you a marriage certificate for your parents. And then use that to start the citizenship process. Okay.
In each state, they have a vital records. I think it's the name of the places that provide all the birth certificates, marriage, that sort of work that with that department to apply for an official marriage certificate.
Okay, next question from Ida. Can you not also get citizenship when on the D7 program? And can you explain what the D7 program is?
Yeah, so that's kind of what the investing in Portugal golden visa, that's kind of where that comes into play a little bit. There's also a residency part, and that we didn't specify this because again, it is a little, I don't want to say complicated, but it's subject to change. So the D7 visa is actually a residency visa to live in Portugal. I believe it's good for 2 years as of right now. We can help a person collect all the necessary documents that they would need to apply for the D7 visa, but that visa actually has to be granted by a consulate, so Boston consulate or an embassy, something like that. After you have been living in Portugal for a certain amount of years, you can apply for your citizenship. It's five years living in Portugal. So it's very similar to that last slide that we discussed.
Okay. For those going through grandparents and have to take a language test, is there a specific place that you take a test, or is it online, or how does that, what's the format of the test?
Here in the United States, this responsibility belongs to the coordenação do ensino da língua portuguesa. That Professor João Caixinha is the coordinator for the Portuguese language here. He is the one, I know they have 2 phases. I think one is in May, another one is in November. They have to, and they will be able to do in different states too, because they have a coordinador or responsible for the Portuguese language in California and Newark, and they provide the test too. But it's important. We have in our website the information. You can contact them directly. It's easier to coordinate with them the dates and at least collect some material to study to do the test.
Okay. What about individuals born in former Portuguese colonies like Angola, Mozambique? What is the process for these individuals? So are those individuals automatically Portuguese citizens also? No? Okay. So what would be the process?
No, they not, because at that time they will be able to be Portuguese or get dual citizenship before they turn 18 years old. If the parents did at the time apply for their citizenship, at some point they have a birth certificate registered at the civil registry in Lisbon, and they Portuguese already. If not, they need to prove at this time that one of the parents did the citizenship, and now they will be able to apply for theirs, but needs to be done on time. I don't know if they did on the past, but right now, if they don't have any proof that the parents did the register before they became adults, or if they don't have any Portuguese documents that prove the parents apply for a citizenship, at this moment, they not be able to be Portuguese.
Like there's no path for them at all?
No.
Except maybe in the golden visa.
Golden visa, or if they have, or marriage.
Or marriage.
Right, or if they have some way to connect themselves to a Portuguese citizen, a grandparent or something like that. But just being born in Angola to Angolan parents that never, during that period in the 70s where Portugal was granting citizenship to the people living in the former colonies, if they didn't take it during that window, then they can apply.
Okay. One other way that we didn't really talk about yet is just going and living there, right? You decide you want to leave the US and I'm going to go live and retire in Portugal. So what's the time frame? I know you have to apply for a visa and there's a whole other process to become a resident. But is there a way that, after you're there for a certain amount of time, you can apply for citizenship because you're living there?
You only can live in Portugal. You can only visit Portugal for 3 months. It's the same rule when someone with a Portuguese passport comes and visit the United States. But if you want to stay there longer than 3 months, you need to apply for a visa through the consulate before your trip and explain why you want to spend more than 3 months in Portugal, or to study, or to do business, or do something different. But you need to apply through the consulate here in the United States before you leave the country. You need to have an authorization to stay there.
Okay.
So that would
And
be
then,
the E7 visa process. So
okay, and you explain
it would be the 2 years first, and then you would have to reapply again for your next D7 visa. And then after 5 years is when you could actually apply for your citizenship that way. But again, it would have to be through the consulate that
Got it.
it does all the workings with it. So it's one of the more temperamental ways to become a citizen.
Okay. And this question is something that Marcia, you actually addressed at the very beginning, which is if you were born in Portugal, you were a Portuguese citizen and you will always be a Portuguese citizen for your entire life, right? You may not have the paperwork, but someone does somewhere. You just have to get it. So my father, Nancy Couto, my father was born in Portugal and became a naturalized US citizen after she was born. Does the fact that he was a Portuguese citizen when she was born make it possible for her to attain citizenship through a parent? And the question is, or the answer would be yes, right? Because he was born in Portugal. She just has to obtain his documents, right?
And to obtain, at this moment, we have all the birth certificates that people that were born in Portugal, everything is online. You don't need to apply or go in person to the consulate just to apply for a birth certificate. You just need to send an email and pay the fees, and you will be able to get your birth certificate in your email in 1 or 2 days. But I think what's more confusion for everyone, that's when we became American, we do all the provas de que I promise that I'm gonna refuse, or my nationality, my Portuguese one. It's true, it's the American rule, but the Portugal is the one that is protecting you. You can take another citizenship, but you're going to keep yours. But for the American part, it's true, we renounce our Portuguese, our nationality before the American one. But that's why people, when they said, I became American, I'm not Portuguese anymore. No, you are. Yeah. Doesn't matter, because you were born there, and you can spend all your life, never take a Portuguese document. It's okay. You can do it anytime. Your Portuguese birth certificate, it's there, and you will be able to prove that it's you.
So I think that the US does now allow dual citizenship, right? So there was a period of time, in fact, when my husband joined the Navy, he was made to renounce his Portuguese citizenship. But then once he was out, and I think it was President Clinton that allowed dual citizenship again. So I don't think that the US is a problem so much anymore, unless you're finding that it is.
And do you have Portuguese citizens that at some point, to facilitate the process to become American or to apply for a job, they have to renounce the Portuguese one, and at the time they sign a paper that says, I'm going to renounce my Portuguese citizenship, and it's there. If you apply for your certificate, we have a register that says that person lost the Portuguese citizenship. It's okay. We will be able to reapply and say, time, but I want to have my Portuguese citizenship again. You do a different process. It's done in Lisbon. You will be able to get your citizenship back.
So we're getting a few questions about appointments at consulates, and I will say that each consulate is a little different. A lot of them do have online appointment calendars where you can request an appointment online. Some work better than others. I know here in San Francisco, they've started a waiting list. So like if you can't find an appointment on the calendar, you can submit your name for the waiting list. And as cancellations happen, they will kind of work their way down the list for those who are waiting for an appointment. So it's getting a little easier from what we've heard. But I would just say, if you continue to have problems, you can always reach out to PALCUS and we will do what we can to help facilitate an appointment. So you can send us an email. palcus@palcus.org, because we have done that. We have reached out to local consulates to help facilitate a process when someone is not getting a response. Another question. The process for the Azores, is it any different or Madeira? It's the same, I mean, because it's the same country, right? Even though the Azores is an autonomous region, it's the same process. And do you still go through Lisbon, or do you have to go through an entity in the Azores?
Still go through Lisbon. Yep.
Okay, got it. For the Golden Visa program, do you need to have the investment for 5 years first before applying for citizenship, to clarify?
That's when we would work with another entity in Portugal to clarify that. That's what we mean by it's always subject to change. So it depends on the kind of investment that you have and how much you have invested. That's the easiest way to answer that.
Okay. We have someone here who says, what would disqualify you in an FBI check? He has past records, but they've all been expunged more than 25 years ago. So would that show up on an FBI record background check?
Could, depends on what
they were,
what kind of crimes they were, if it was, at a state level, if it was federal. If it doesn't show up on the FBI record, then you're good to go, and Portugal doesn't have to know about it. If you do your fingerprints, then it would be the same as applying for US citizenship, right? It is subject to the country to decide whether or not they would accept you as a citizen based on that.
Someone is asking to put back the slide that shows citizenship through a spouse. You want to click back to that one?
Yeah, sure.
So we've had a couple of questions about working with Portugal Solutions. So yes, you can hire Portugal Solutions. You would go to their website and submit, send them an email, explain your situation, and Marcia and Sabrina will explain whether or not they can work with you. And if they can, I'm sure they will refer you to someone who might be able to help you. We have a question here from Marion. Sabrina, you said buyer beware regarding the investment program, like real estates and funds. Could you explain a little bit more about what you meant by that?
I just mean it's not as simple as investing 250,000 euros and within 5 years you'll become a Portuguese citizen.
It's not that simple, right?
It's not that simple. There's a bunch of different ways to invest, whether it's in funds, whether it's in real estate. I mean, they have at least, from what we have seen, they have at least 6 or 7 ways to invest in Portugal. So we don't like to tell people that it's a simple, invest 500,000 euros in a business or in a real estate project, and you're good to go in 5 years. The process is a little bit more in depth with that. But the good news is that there are businesses that we work with in Portugal, real estate agents that we work with in Portugal, who have done this in the past. They know the ins and outs of it. So we're just the in-between person for that. Whatever documents have to be collected from here, any translations that have to be done, anything that needs to be sent to Portugal, or if we need to schedule meetings, we can do that in our office.
Okay. We're getting quite a few questions about the documents and how to certify those and what is an apostille. Can you explain which documents would need an apostille and what that is, and versus which documents would need a notary, if any?
Yeah, so it's going to depend on how you would be applying for your citizenship. So as we mentioned before, if it's through a parent, nothing has to have an apostille unless it's coming from a different state. And an apostille is just something that comes from the Secretary of State's office that certifies it's a true and valid document that's coming from the state, wherever it is.
To clarify, a notary can't do an apostille.
No, you would actually
have to send it to
an apostille from a notary signature, which is what happens with our translations. So we'll have somebody translate a document, a notary public notarize the document, and then the apostille goes on top of that. Very, very simple to get. You get it from your Secretary of State's office. Most states actually allow you to do it online. A lot of times we just send a link to clients and say, here's the step-by-step process. But if you look on your state's Secretary of State website and you look up apostille, there's a whole step-by-step on how to get it. It's going to be on any document that is American. So if it's your birth certificate, if it's a marriage certificate, if it's a FBI criminal record, which is always the most difficult to get the apostille because it comes from Washington, D.C., translations, anything like that.
Okay. Let's see. With investment golden visas, is that for one person or a family? Do direct descendants and spouses of golden visa holders get visas too?
So first it would be one person and then they can pass it along to their immediate family.
Okay, good to know. Going back to the language proficiencies test, at what point in the process do you take the test? Is it the very last thing, or is it kind of in the middle, or can it be any time?
Can be any time after you have approved that your process is already on system in Lisbon. You can do, it's not going to finish. It's not going to be concluded until you have your final test. But it's better for the person do it at the same time, because since the process can take 2-3 years in Lisbon, you can start the process at the same time. Send all the paperwork to Lisbon, and at the same time start your process to do the test.
Got it. Okay. Questions about, you work with anybody in the United States, right? They don't have to be in Rhode Island?
Nope, don't have to be in Rhode Island.
Got it. And there are official sources to translate, right? So even if maybe you translated it yourself, you would still have to get it approved by, they have translators that are certified by the consulates. Is that correct? Can you explain the translation process?
Marcia, you want to explain?
Yeah, you don't need to. No, you're in our case, Sabrina is the one that is the official translator because she's certified to do the translation. And what we do, it's the person to translate the document needs to be certified, and the notary public is going to certify her signature. And after it's gonna get an apostille that proves that the person that is signed is a notary public with an active license. That's why we can translate a document from any state. Doesn't matter, just need to be an original, and the office will provide a certified translation with a certified notary public with an apostille.
Got it. We've had a request to flip to the parents slide again. So we're also getting a lot of comments about, I've sent in my paperwork, it's taking a long time, I'm not getting an answer, I went through another service, that kind of thing. So what do you advise? And actually PALCUS has gotten this question a lot as well. They've got all their paperwork together, they sent everything in, they emailed, they've called, they're not getting an answer. What do you do? Do you start the process over again and work through a company like Portugal Solutions? Do you try and go out on your own? What would be your advice to somebody who has actually gone through the process, gotten all the documents that they needed, sent it all in, and they're still just not having any luck?
Yeah, typically we don't want to restart everything from square one unless something has been rejected and you have to do so. And the only reason we don't want to do that is because then you have to pay for everything all over again. And we don't like making people pay, thousands of dollars for the Portuguese citizenship. It depends on how you applied. The easiest way to answer it is it depends how you applied for your citizenship and where you applied for your citizenship. If you did use your local consulate, please reach out to them. Please, keep trying to get in contact with them. Email is always the easiest way to reach the consulates. We tend to see that, phone, they don't really pick up the phone, and it's going to depend on which consulate it is. So try to reach out via email. If you sent it to the Conservatoria in Lisbon, if you sent it to Portugal directly, as Marcia mentioned, there should be like a tracking code or a password that you can use to track that process. If you don't have it, we could provide you the email, or you could find the email online for the Conservatoria, and you can reach out to them via email and just ask them where the process is and if they have any updates for you. It happens to a lot of people where they send everything and then they get no word for a couple of years, and they want to make
Right.
sure everything is where it should be.
Right.
So
And in
that's
fact, I think the link to that website is on the PALCUS resources page as well. So where Portugal Solutions and some of the other services are listed, there's other consular and citizenship resources there on that page as well. We're getting some questions about marriage and divorce and things like that. So a couple of things. Why would I need to register my marriage in order for my daughter to get her citizenship if I'm already a citizen? And do I also need to register my divorce in order for the child to get citizenship?
Yeah, you have to register. People, they don't understand, because at some point at the time the child was born, they were married, but when they start the process to get the citizenship, they're not married anymore. They have the divorce, and they need to register the divorce after. It's complicated, but we need to follow the rules. Because why I have to register a marriage when I'm not married anymore? It's just because to become Portuguese, the Portuguese law says you need to prove that you recognize your child as your child when he was minor. And the only way to follow this rule is register a marriage, because it's the only fact that at the time he was born, you were married. We have single parents too, and it's okay. You don't have a marriage to register, but be careful, because in each state you have a different birth certificate for unmarried parents. It's not the same format as married. And to have or follow that rule, you need to register a marriage. But what's going to happen is you're going to have in Portugal a marriage, and after that you have a divorce to register. It's complicated because the divorce, you have to hire a lawyer in Portugal to register the divorce. It's not going to change anything. It's not going to, the dates, the facts, everything is going to be the same. You just need to have an original final decree, hire a lawyer, and the costs to do this in Portugal, it's a little bit expensive, but that's the only way that you have to register a divorce in Portugal after a marriage, because it's going to be your decision. I have to register a marriage because my son or my daughter is applying for citizenship, and I need to do it because they already have more than 18 years old. But at some point I have to register the divorce. And if you don't need to do anything in Portugal, just keep the marriage there and you keep going with your life in the United States. That is not going to change anything. If you don't have anything else to do in Portugal, it's okay. It's just a step that is registered there and doesn't have any implication in your life.
Got it. A couple of questions related to discrepancies in names, right? So we have one situation here where the parents were married in Portugal, so they have a Portuguese marriage certificate, but on the marriage certificate, it's one name, and on all of his other documentation, it's a different name, same person. Same thing where somebody Americanized their name when they came here. So when it comes to name stuff, what do you recommend? Is there a form that can be filled out? Do you have to get a document from the United States somewhere, whether it's the state or whatever? What would be your recommendation when it comes to name discrepancies?
You have to, I don't know if Sabrina, if you want to answer or not, but we have two different situations here. Or you have a different name in Portugal, or you have a different name in the United States. If you want to fix your name in Portugal, it's okay. We have a process that we call change names. You will be able to have in Portugal the same name as in America.
Oh, okay. I can hear you now. Well, it sounds like you went silent for a minute, but I can hear you again.
Okay. What happened here?
Oh yeah, everything is like. Yeah, it happened to me as well. It said something about the microphone.
Oh, I'm seeing everything totally fine here, and we can hear you.
Okay. As I was saying, in Portugal, you can have your birth name, but you will be able to update your name, do a different process. You pay a fee, I think at the time was 100 euros or 150 euros, and you will be able to have in Portugal the same name as United States. And on the other way, when you're in United States, sometimes they translate the name or they change the name when they became American. It's easier to prove because in your American certificate, when you became American, you have at some point an attachment or a register that mentioned your old name and the new name when you became American. Mm-hmm. It's enough proof to at least have a reason to have different names. And in Portugal, they accept this proof, not a problem. And okay. Sometimes what happens is birth certificates, as the American way, they cut names. They don't use the full name in Portugal. They only use the first and last name. But it doesn't matter because at some point, that birth certificate shows that their parents or their mother or father was born in Portugal. The information that the place that they were born was Portugal, it's more important than the name because you always can explain the difference of names.
Yeah, and like we always say, every case is a different case. So let's say if your name in Portugal is José and your name in the US is Joseph, that's not typically a problem that they have in Portugal because they recognize that the name just gets translated. We have seen cases where, let's say, some person has 3 names when they come here, right? And then US will cut one of those names, and sometimes Portugal will claim that they can't really confirm that it's the same person. So there is a way, sometimes it takes longer depending on what the name discrepancy is, but there is a way to make that connection.
Okay. So we have hit the hour mark. I don't know if we can stay on another couple of minutes, but there's enough questions here for us to spend the rest of the day doing this. So I think what we'll do is maybe take 1 or 2 more questions, but all the other questions that we're getting, perhaps we can have a follow-up session just to answer questions. Of course, we will send all the questions to both of you, Sabrina and Marcia, for you to help answer as well. If you want to throw back up the slide, Sabrina, real quick, for your contact information, and if people want to contact you directly, they can. And then I'm also, in a minute, I'm going to throw up another slide with our contact information, because again, whether it's questions about working with the consulates or anything like that, you can send them to us. But let's do just a couple more if you have a few minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Oops. What if you didn't, so name change, what if you didn't legally change your name and you just used a different name in the US? So same, you'd have to do one of those name change documents that you mentioned, right?
Yes.
And what if you have no children? Do you still need to register your divorce?
Nope. You only register the divorce to your child to become Portuguese. If you don't have to. Only if you want to have your married name in Portugal, you need to register your marriage. Just for information. If not, you're gonna have your single name in Portugal.
Mm-hmm. But also with the divorce, if you do have a marriage registered in Portugal, and let's say eventually you want to buy property, or you have, let's say an inheritance case or something, it would be wise to follow through with a divorce in Portugal. That is always our suggestion, because you don't want to have a marriage impact that in the future.
Can you talk a little bit about when spouses need to be present? So we've had questions about If they're registering their marriage certificate, does the spouse have to be present? If the mother or father is applying for citizenship for a child, does the other parent have to be present? So can you talk a little bit about when another parent has to be present?
Yeah, for minors, both of parents needs to give authorization to start the process of the citizenship. On spouse case, it's him. He's the one that is gonna sign the application. He's the one who's gonna provide all the information. He's not gonna be present anytime. The process can be done everything online.
Excellent. Okay, so with that, I'm just going to throw up a final screen, just share some final slides here. Oops, I always hate it when I do that.
I just want to complete an information when Sabrina said about the divorce. It's just an advice. It's important because at some point, as Sabrina mentioned, it's important to have your marital status updated in Portugal. And when you have a first marriage, and after you have to register a divorce, and after you have to register a second marriage, doesn't matter. It's only papers, but be careful when you have to deal with, because all the marriage debts and birth, we will be able to do it directly at the civil registry, but the divorce, you need to hire a lawyer. And our advice to you, it's only at least ask for an estimated to 1 or 2 lawyers, because if everything is already included, the translation, the certified documents, it's important because in the past was a little bit too much what they charge to do this type of service in Portugal. And they're not going to change anything. They're going to start a process at the Lisbon court, and they're going to confirm a thing that happened in America. That's why it's another service that we provide, because we will be able to at least see what they did and what is missing. Of the Portuguese court is asking for another information. At least the process can keep going, and it's not going to take 1 or 2 or 3 years that it's used to be.
Right. Okay. This has been really helpful. Again, for those of you looking for information online, you can go to the PALCUS site, go to resources. You will be shown some agencies that will help you, as well as some links to agencies in official government agencies in Portugal that has, where you can look things up online. But we will be doing a follow-up session because there's too many questions to answer today. But thank you so much, Sabrina and Marcia. This has been amazing. You're full of such helpful information, and we really appreciate your time. For those of you watching, thank you for joining. And if you found this information helpful, please consider becoming a PALCUS member, because it is through membership that the organization continues to exist and we're able to have these types of webinars. So if you'd like to see more of these types of webinars, if you think it's important to have an organization that provides this kind of information, then we need your help to continue to exist. And so we encourage you to become a PALCUS member. It's quite affordable. I think you spend $50 on coffee in a month or less. So thank you very much, everybody. And with that, we will say até a próxima. And if you, again, have any questions, just let us know. But thank you very much, everybody, for joining.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Obrigada. Ciao.